and salutations, RP fam. Thank you guys for joining me for another video. So I've already done my quarterback rankings and my running back rankings. So what's up next? It is wide receivers. Today I'm going to go over the top 50 options that I have. I'm going to break these down into tiers for you guys as well to try to show you guys where we want to invest our picks and where we can get the most value. My running back video was about 55 minutes. So I'm going to try to shorten this wide receiver one a little bit, try to streamline the information as much as possible. But of course, I want to break down exactly why I feel the way I do about these players. But before we get into all the fun, please consider liking the video if you enjoy the content today. That gets Relentless Press's name out there. We can keep pushing forward because of it. If you have not done so already, subscribe to the channel. That helps me out so very much. We're well on our way to our first 1,000 subscribers. By clicking that button, you can join us along in the journey. Now let's hop into it without any further ado. In tier one, my number one wide receiver is not going to surprise anyone. It is Justin Jet Jefferson. He's the 1-1 in basically all styles of drafts this year. He was first last year in targets, also in red zone targets, and he was 9th in deep targets. So those money touches are the ones that he is getting fed early and often. We also have the addition of Jordan Addison in Minnesota. That means teams aren't going to be able to hone in on him quite as much. And Jefferson's statistics and numbers speak for themselves. He has been the most consistent, productive receiver in the NFL over the last 3 seasons. No one matches that consistency or the ceiling he offers this year, and that is why he is without a doubt the number one receiver and probably player on most people's boards. On to 2, it is Ja'Marr Chase. He was last year's wide receiver 4 in fantasy overall, and he's averaging over 86 yards per game in his career. He's going to continue to put up those kind of numbers this year as Joe Burrow and him continue to build that rapport together. They get better and better every year. Over the last 2 seasons, Chase has scored 22 touchdowns. You love that tutty upside. That isn't going anywhere either in this Bengals offense. And maybe the most important thing about Chase that sets him apart and potentially gives him a leg up as the number 1 overall receiver when all is said and done at the end of the year is that number 4 strength of schedule. He's got a ton of great smash matchups that we can take advantage of this season. And that is actually it for my first tier. I think these 2 guys set themselves apart from the rest. Tier 2 starts with Tyreek Hill. Was an absolute baller in 2022. 5 games last year with over 140 receiving yards. He led the league in deep targets. That part of his game came back because actually the year previous, his last year in Kansas City, his average depth of target numbers dropped significantly. So to see that number go back up, see him getting those deep looks, which obviously bring us big time points when they hit, that is a great thing to see. He was 2nd in the NFL last year with a 31.6% target share. No matter who was quarterback for Miami, they were giving the ball to Tyreek Hill. I think Tyreek Hill is a legitimate threat to go for 2,000 yards this year if Tua can stay on the field for the entirety of the 17 games. And if that happens, Hill has a clear path to the number 1 wide receiver in all of football. The last player in tier 2 for me is my little Cooper Kupp, who had a lot of success last year before he went down with that injury. Prior to going down, Kupp was 3rd in target share at 31%. He also was 4th in targets per route run, and he was 12th in air yard share as well. So he was getting all the looks and then some from Matthew Stafford. I expect Stafford, now that he's healthy, to go back to the well. There's no reason that we don't see Kupp get 150 plus targets this season. He was the number 1 wide receiver in fantasy points per game last year, so that production did not go anywhere. If Matthew Stafford comes back close to 100%, the Rams are probably going to have to pass a lot because they're not going to be very good. That means tons of opportunities for Kupp to put points in our lineups. Into tier 3 now, my 5th overall wide receiver is none other than Stefon Diggs. He's posted 3 straight years now with over 100 receptions, over 1,225 yards, and 8 touchdowns or more. So he has absolutely crushed as a Buffalo Bill. Diggs is also top 10 in target share, red zone targets, and yards per route run last year, so clearly still putting up elite metrics. There is no reason for us to be concerned with Diggs this season. My 6th wideout is A.J. Brown. He was the 8th ranked player in fantasy points per game at the position last year, and he was also 2nd in yards per route run. He's had 11 touchdowns or more in 2 of the last 3 seasons. There is no reason to think that A.J. Brown takes a step back after his first year was such a success for Philadelphia. A top 12 strength of schedule and being attached to Jalen Hurts is only bonus points for him. Now up to number 7 we go. I have CeeDee Lamb sitting here. His receptions, targets, yardage, and touchdowns have all gone up in every single year of his career. He continues that upward trajectory this year. I think that he has a possibility to do even bigger things than he did in 2022 when he was the overall wide receiver 6. Last year he posted 107 receptions, over 1,350 yards, and 9 tutties, and he is the clear alpha in this offense once again. No Zeke Elliott, no Dalton Schultz means more opportunities for CeeDee Lamb. All they really did this year was add Brandin Cooks. He is not a threat to that alpha status at all. I think he'll more or less be a receiving option that is underneath for Dak Prescott, helping him rack up yards and first downs, but not getting those all-important red zone looks as well as the deep ball. As we move on to number 8, it is Davante Adams. He is the last player I have in tier number 3. Over 100 receptions, 1,300 receiving yards, and 11 touchdowns in 4 out of the last 5 seasons. So Adam has been the model of consistency and big-time production. He was number 1 in target share last year at over 32.5%. So still that elite target earner, and that is not going to change now that we have a quarterback change in Vegas. If anything, we could see that crazy target share go up even higher. There's no Darren Waller now in Vegas to take some touches away from Adams. I think Jimmy Garoppolo knows if he wants to be successful for this team, he is going to have to feed the alpha receiver. Adams could be in crazy enough for a career year in Vegas if everything hits for him. We're going to now move to my 4th tier, but before we do that, great time to remind you guys, like the video if you're enjoying the content and subscribe to the channel. Make sure you check out my quarterback and running back ranking videos as well. I have the long version and I also have some shorts available to watch. In tier number 4, it is Amon-Ra St. Brown starting us off. He was last year's wide receiver 10, basically out of nowhere. I know he had a hot finish to 2021, but I don't think many of us expected to carry over so well into 2022. Now, the injuries really slowed down his overall production last year and left owners hurting. But if he can stay healthy this year, he could easily post top 5 numbers at the position, especially with the 6-game suspension to start the year for Jameson Williams. Amon-Ra was 11th last year in target share, 3rd in targets per route run, 8th in red zone targets, and 4th in yards after the catch. So all of those metrics that we hope to see him hitting on, he did in big ways, and he has legit top 5 upside, I think, like I said, if everything hits perfectly for him. To round out my top 10, all the way up is Jalen Waddle. He was the wide receiver 7 overall last year, and he had tons of issues at that quarterback position. Miami was a dumpster fire there for much of the year, switching between Bridgewater, Tua, Skylar Thompson. Whoever was back there, it did not really matter. Waddle produced, although I will say he is better with Tua at the helm. He was 10th in yards after the catch last year, 7th in receiving yards, 4th in yards per route run, and 3rd in fantasy points per target. So if Waddle had opportunities, he was constantly making the most of them, and he averaged over 18 yards per reception with that massive 4th yards after the catch ranking. At number 11, and one of my final wide receiver ones, Garrett Wilson should have a massive breakout year for us. And last year, we saw a glimpse of what he is capable of. He posted a top 10 PFF receiving grade. we think about the conditions in 2022 for the New York Jets. It starts with the quarterback position, which was a travesty. If you thought it was bad in Miami, he had it easy compared to what Garrett Wilson went through for the Jets last year. Wilson ranked 93rd in target quality and 92nd in catchable target rate. So even though he produced for us as owners last year, he was a player that definitely had to overcome his surroundings, and that is going to obviously change now that Aaron Rodgers is in town. He should help elevate Wilson's game to new heights. That is why I have him, and many do, as a breakout candidate wideout in 2023. Not only did he have poor quarterback play, but he also was not truly a full-time player until about week 8 last year, and he was still able to earn top 10 target numbers with nearly 150 looks. Finally, in non-Zach Wilson starts, obviously the biggest issue for the Jets last year, 11 targets per game is what went Wilson's way. He got 6 of them for 82 yards receiving per game. Now, if you extrapolate that out, especially with Rodgers at the helm, we can easily see why everyone is on the Wilson bandwagon this season. The last wide receiver one I have is not actually a wide receiver one on his own team, but T. Higgins is up next at 12. There are plenty of reasons that I love him yet again this season. Higgins in the last 2 seasons has finished as wide receiver 18 and wide receiver 12, so he has been here and done it before. We obviously love that strength of schedule, having a top 5 easiest one in the NFL, and the touchdown equity that Higgins provides us also is a boost. He's had 6 touchdowns or more in all 3 years of his career. The reason for that, this guy is a monster in the red zone. He has the size, the leaping ability, and the hands to bring it down, and Burrow knows that and feeds him when they are in close. The Bengals also score over 26 points a game last year. They'll be at or around that number yet again. Higgins should score at least 6, and he has the potential to easily hit double-digit tutties. Of course, Jamar Chase on the other side makes his life easier. The Bengals are going to score a ton of points just like they did last year, and Higgy will be a big part of that. Next up, into my 5th tier we go, and another wide receiver 2 on his own team is here. I have DeVonta Smith in at the lucky number 13. Smith was a top 10 wideout last year, so once again, been there and done that. He was 13th in targets and 14th in target share, which leads us to believe that right around where he finished last year is where he should get back to yet again. He was a top 20 player in PFF receiving grade and in yards per route run, so the efficiency has been there for Smith over the last 2 years because he balled out as a rookie as well. He just saw more opportunities as Jalen Hurts unlocked himself last season. I think Philly could take another step forward, and even if they remain close to where they were last year, obviously that was more than enough for Smith in 2022. My 14th ranked player is Chris Olave, another second-year wideout here. We love their opportunities for breakout. History has shown us that they are the ones that are most likely to do so. Olave last year was 15th in target share. He was 3rd in air yard share. He was a top 10 performer in targets per route run as well. And the biggest number, which surprised me a little bit, was open rate for Chris Olave. He was ranked 7th in the NFL, right behind Stephon Diggs. I think the most important change here for New Orleans is the move to Derek Carr at quarterback, getting out of that really bad situation that they were in last year. There should be huge improvements from this offense as a whole, and Olave as the true alpha and number 1 wideout in this offense should benefit the most from it. My 15th ranked wide receiver, and someone that I think has opportunity to do much higher that I haven't ranked, is Amari Cooper. He was the wide receiver 17 last year, so pretty close to where I have him ranked here, and he did that with Jacoby Brissett for most of the year, and then obviously the shell of Deshaun Watson, who had a ton of rust and did not look anything close to what he was a couple of seasons ago in Houston. Now I think that changes this year for Cleveland with a full off season and the distractions out of the way for Watson, and that means that there is big time upside for Cooper here. He has a top 11 strength of schedule as well, so plenty of opportunities for games in which he has advantages. Finally, we look at the money touches, and Cooper saw plenty of opportunity there in 2022. He was top 12 in both red zone and in deep targets. Next, into my 6th tier, I started off with DJ Moore. Moore was 27th last year in PFF receiving grade, which does not sound great until you think about the quality and the catchable rates that he had to deal with. Both of those, just like Garrett Wilson, were outside of the top 90 receivers. Moore has a history of production. He's been a top 20 wideout in back-to-back years, and he's done that with more or less, no offense Carolina, but jokes at the quarterback position, and he's not going to have to deal with that with up-and-coming star Justin Fields. DJ Moore offers us high-end wide receiver 2 upside and legitimate wide receiver 1 upside if everything hits right, and we are paying a low-end wide receiver 2 price. I think the ADP for Moore right now is somewhere around wide receiver 20, wide receiver 22, so I have him ranked a good bit higher than consensus for good reason. I think that Justin Fields' transformation is only going to make Moore a more dangerous threat in our lineups. My next player, and in at 17, is Deebo Samuel. Definitely a down year for Deebo last year after a monster 2021 where he saw success not only through the air with 1,400 yards, but on the ground as well where he had 8 touchdowns. So he was just a year removed from that season where he had over 1,750 yards and 14 total touchdowns. So I do not think it is time to fully back out on the Deebo Samuel hype. I think there is an opportunity here for him to bounce back in a big way. He was still a top 20 player last year with over a 25% target share when he was healthy. And the 49ers offense also finished top 6 in scoring last year. And they're only going to be better this year with another year in the offense, especially for Brock Purdy, who came in very cold and is now the QB1 for them. Deebo is one of the most dangerous players in the league after the catch. And that is something the 49ers love to set up on offense, so that meshing should produce big-time numbers for him, and I expect a bounce-back year from Deebo. My 18th ranked wideout is DK Metcalf from Seattle. First thing we see is that top 10 strength of schedule. Metcalf has been a consistent producer in fantasy over the last 3 years, so even though there is some worry about the targets that may or may not come to him this season, I think that we can invest in him with confidence. Over the last 3 years, he's posted finishes of wide receiver 5, 10, and 17 last year, but the most important thing for Metcalf is his usage in the red zone. He was 2nd overall last year in red zone targets. It's that size and athleticism that is going to keep Geno Smith feeding him. So even though we have 3 legitimate wide receivers in Seattle, Metcalf will be the true number 1 in the alpha, and he will get those money looks in close where he scores touchdowns at a very high rate. We're halfway through tier number 6 now. Up next at number 19, I have Keenan Allen. He was the wide receiver 4 in fantasy last year from weeks 11 to 18. Now we know that Mike Williams was banged up during that time, so we can't just expect those numbers and production to carry over into 2023, but it does show us that that upside and his ability is still there. With Quentin Johnston being drafted in the 1st round, I am lower than consensus on Keenan Allen because with Mike Williams there and Quentin Johnston as well, in his 30-year-old season, I can see Keenan Allen taking a step backwards, but he still should be a legitimate wide receiver 2 option week in and week out. He will give you that solid and consistent floor, and if that is something you are looking for, Allen will be an awesome pick for you this season. To round out my top 20, I have Calvin Ridley. I will admit I am a little bit hesitant to just jump in with both feet on Ridley because of that time off. However, if we look at what he has done in his history, this is the overall wide receiver 3 in 2020. So we know that he has that big time upside, and Ridley is a proven elite target earner, 27.4% in 2021 after he had that monster season. Even though he didn't see quite as much success, that was 7th in the NFL. Trevor Lawrence is also ascending. I think he is in for a big season. So if Ridley can take the number 1 role in this offense, then the sky is the limit for him. He could easily hit wide receiver 1 numbers. At 21, the next man up and the last person I have in tier number 6 is DeAndre Hopkins. He was the wide receiver 9 in fantasy points per game in 2022, and that was when he missed 8 games, 6 of them due to suspension and 2 of them to that knee sprain. So Nuke did not go anywhere as far as a per game basis, even though the overall numbers didn't match because of all the time missed. Nuke was also top 4 in not only target share last year at nearly 30%, but he was also a top 4 performer in air yard share at over 43.5%. So Nuke was earning targets and he was getting those deep ball looks as well. I don't expect a ton of deep balls in this change to Tennessee's offense, but if they are going to do that, Nuke is going to be the one on the receiving end of it. Obviously, there are some hesitancies because of the quarterback situation. Ryan Tannehill can stay the guy for most, if not all, of the season. Nuke will be just fine. We saw some big years from A.J. Brown as the number 1 with Ryan Tannehill at the controls. Now let's get into tier 7, and I start with a couple guys who I absolutely love. I think they are going to crush their current ADPs. And at 22, one of those players is Drake London. He put up massive numbers as far as efficiency is concerned. If we look at the raw stats, they really weren't there for London last year. But if we dig a little bit deeper, I'm going to show you exactly why I think he is due for a breakout season. So we're going to start with target share, where London ranked 5th highest in the NFL at nearly 30%. London was also 2nd in the NFL in targets per route run, and he was a top 10 performer in receiving grade. If we're looking for the actual production, in weeks 13 to 18 last year, without scoring a touchdown, which is important because those are inflations on numbers, Drake London was the wide receiver 20.5 PPR. So when we match that type of production to the incredible efficiency that we saw from him last year, it equals a breakout player that is flying under the radar right now. I know that the offense in Atlanta isn't exactly something we're super excited about, but I think with the addition of Bijan Robinson, hopefully a bounce back here from Kyle Pitts, Atlanta could be a little better offensively this year than we are giving them credit for. Another guy that I absolutely love, who is a guarantee to crush his current ADP, is Diontae Johnson. I have him at 23. He's somewhere around wide receiver 30, wide receiver 31 right now, which is ludicrous. Last year, no one got open more consistently than Diontae Johnson. He was number 1 in the NFL in open rate. He also had the most receptions without a touchdown in the history of the NFL. And it wasn't even close. He had over 20 catches more than the next closest guy. So a ton of horrible luck for DJ last year that is going to turn around for him this year. DJ was the wide receiver 20 in expected points per game last year. And like I said, he is going outside of the top 30 wideouts right now. It does not make any sense. If Kenny Pickett were to somehow make a leap forward, we have a top 15 upside receiver that we are getting at a bargain price. Diontae Johnson is someone I will have a ton of investment in. The last wide receiver 2 I have is Jerry Jeudy. I have him at 24 here. He was 11th in open rate last year, which was extremely surprising to me because he really didn't seem to do a whole lot last year in that Denver offense, which absolutely crumbled. Nothing really went right for the Broncos last year, and that was included for Jerry Jeudy. However, even though this offense was a dumpster fire in 2022, Jeudy still finished just outside this ranking last year. So when you bring in Sean Payton, you expect a leap forward for this offense. Russell Wilson cannot possibly look as bad as he did last year, and so you expect a jump forward from Jeudy. I am cautiously optimistic that we see that from Denver this year, and that is why I have Jeudy a little lower than consensus, but still in wide receiver 2 land. To round out my top 25 and the last wide receiver I have in tier 7, up next is Christian Watson. Watson absolutely exploded in the second half of last year, and he put up some sparkling metrics to go along with it. He was 3rd in fantasy points per route run, and he was also 4th in yards after the catch per reception, right behind Deebo Samuel, who we know is one of the best to do it at the position. There's massive upside here, but there is also a ton of unknowns because of the Jordan Love situation. Now, if Watson can carve out that clear alpha role, and really when you think about who else is there in Green Bay, I don't see him having a hard time doing it. We could see a 1,200-yard, 10-touchdown season from Watson. But I think that might be close to best case scenario from him, and his range of outcomes is wide, and that is why I have him here at 25. I don't expect Green Bay's offense to be particularly great, so that will hold him back a bit. Moving to tier number 8 and in at 26, I have Terry McLaurin. I have him lower than the general consensus for a couple reasons. And honestly, you can call me crazy, but the biggest reason I have the drop here is that I just do not trust this team. I don't trust this offense, and I do not trust the head coach. After seeing what happened, after bringing in Eric Bieniemy, someone that the Washington Commanders should feel privileged to have that scuffle with Ron Rivera about Bieniemy coaching the team too hard, and then his response to it really had me take a step back on this offense as a whole. I don't really trust a coach who cannot handle his players, who cannot handle the move to an offensive coordinator who made Patrick Mahomes a superstar. So I am out on Washington's offense a little bit more because of that. Commanders also have Jahan Dotson, who did very well in limited samples last year. He is going to siphon targets and touchdowns away from McLaurin, and there is a non-zero chance that he actually takes the wide receiver 1 role from him. Now, there is some good news for McLaurin, which leads us to think that he has the opportunity to still post top 25 numbers over the last 5 years. He's finished as wide receiver 24, 19, 25, and 18. So this ranking here is pretty much McLaurin's floor. Back-to-back Bucks are up next for me at 27 and at 28. I have Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. I think both of these guys are being undervalued right now based on what they have done over the course of their career. Both of them obviously with that top 5 strength of schedule, and Evans has been a proven receiver for forever now. He's been a wide receiver 1 in 5 straight years, and right now we're paying a wide receiver 3 price for him. I have him at wide receiver 27. He is going outside of the top 34 wideouts, so an absolute steal at his current ADP. As far as Chris Godwin is concerned, he was the wide receiver 15 last year in fantasy points per game, and that was with him coming back from a major injury. The volume is going to be there, I think, for both of these guys this year. Tampa is not going to be very good. They're going to be behind a lot. They're going to be throwing. And even though Baker Mayfield doesn't exactly get us super excited, I think he is passable enough to feed these two where they can hit on their ADPs. On to number 29, Christian Kirk is here. He was the wide receiver 18 in fantasy points per game last year, but obviously that addition of Calvin Ridley puts him down a peg. I think he could easily be a wide receiver 2 with this top 10 scoring offense from Jacksonville, but we do not know what that target share is going to look like, how much of the pie he loses to Ridley, so I'm taking a cautious approach to Kirk in 2023. To my 9th tier, and starting it off, is Michael Pittman Jr., who's been a top 24 wide receiver in back-to-back seasons. He was last year's wide receiver 23, and he was wide receiver 21 just a couple seasons ago. Now, Pittman was first in total route wins last year, and he was also third in route win rate. So the talent did not go anywhere. It was still very evident. I think he has top 15 upside as the alpha in this offense if we see a breakout from Anthony Richardson. Pittman is one of my favorite players when we look at his price to what his upside might be. We can basically buy him at his floor, and we get that top 5 schedule as a bonus. Up next at 31 is a guy I love, who I think we were maybe a year early in predicting a breakout for. It is Gabe Davis, last year's wide receiver 28, and right now I am much higher than consensus on him. Gabe Davis is going somewhere around wide receiver 40, which I think is absolutely criminal. Everything we love about Gabe Davis last year when he was a top 15 wideout is still irrelevant in 2023, but now we are just paying pennies on the dollar, and that is a bet I am willing to make 99 times out of 100. Gabe Davis is someone I will also have a ton of ownership on. He's attached to Josh Allen. The Bills are going to score a ton of points points. If anything were to happen to Stephon Diggs, heaven forbid, Gabe Davis has top 10 wide receiver potential. So I love the upside that he possesses, and we are getting him for next to nothing. Another breakout candidate from last year is up next. This is Brandon Ayuk's spot at 32. He was 8th in open rate last year, right behind Davante Adams, which I honestly couldn't believe when I saw it. The thing that gives me pause and a reason I'm a little more down on Ayuk is that he had the 11th most touchdowns among wideouts last year. He is easily due from some negative regression in that category. And I think those numbers really move to Deebo Samuel. That is why I have them kind of flip-flopped as far as where the general consensus is on them. But Ayuk could be the 3rd and maybe the 4th target in the passing game, depending on what happens with McCaffrey out of the backfield. So that's why I have him here at 32, not a little bit higher. Up next at 33, I have Mike Williams. Last year's wide receiver, 20 in fantasy points per game, but we know Big Mike does not play every game, not even close. And when he does, he's banged up a lot of the time. So that is really a concern for me and why I might not be investing too much in Williams this year. We just can't trust him on a week in and week out basis. And then in addition to that, we see the drafting of Quentin Johnston, who could take that number 2 role in the offense. And he does a lot of the things well that Mike Williams does with that size, that leaping ability. Chargers offense is still going to be great. Justin Herbert is going to ball out with Kellen Moore at the helm. So that is why I think there is still a clear path for Williams to be at worst a wide receiver 3 for us this season. Into tier number 10 we go, and leading it off is one of my favorite rookie wideouts in Jordan Addison. He is going to slide right in for Adam Thielen, who left Minnesota in free agency. The Vikings brought him in to be that number 2 in the offense, and I think he has wide receiver 2 upside as far as season long is concerned, and I'm going to show you why. First and foremost, with Justin Jefferson on the other side, there are going to be great matchups for Addison on a week in and week out basis. We talked about him sliding right into Thielen. Well, these are Thielen's numbers from last year. 17% target share, 107 targets, over 700 yards, and 6 tutties. Now, these aren't massive numbers, but that's because Thielen was a horrible performer when we look at metrics. He was outside of the top 50. And so if Addison can at least be average in those categories, he will crush these numbers, which leads me to believe he has legit top 20 upside as a wideout this year. Another rookie I have up next is JSN, Jaxon Smith-Njigba. I have no idea how to say his name. We're going to roll with that though. First thing we see is a top 10 schedule for him. Now, I don't love the landing spot in Seattle because they already have DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett. But Lockett is over 30 years old now and maybe on the downside of his career, and that is where JSN can step in. This is a guy who dominated in college. He was 1st in yards per route run and 1st in PFF receiving grade in 2021. He is an elite prospect who I fully expect to take over the number 2 role for Seattle. To 36, Marquise Brown is here. I have him a little bit lower than consensus because Arizona's offense and the situation there is absolutely brutal, and we don't know when Kyler Murray is going to be back. However, if things break right, there is a path where Brown can be a hit for us this year. He averaged over 12 points per game in half PPR in the 8 games that he played without Nuke last year. And DeAndre Hopkins is gone. So there is no one to threaten wide receiver 1 role here for Marquise Brown. He was the overall wide receiver 7 from weeks 1 to 6 when Nuke was on that suspension. So we see that big time upside from him as well. And over a quarter of his games in 2022, he was a top 12 performer. So when he hit big, and he gave us week winning upside. I don't expect a ton of that without Kyler Murray, but if we see good signs that he comes back sooner rather than later, then Marquise Brown could certainly crush this ADP as my last wide receiver 3. We just talked about his teammate, but here up next at 37, I have Tyler Lockett. Lockett is going to have those games where he catches a deep ball over the top for 60 and a tutty, or he breaks free on a screen and takes one to the house. but he's also going to have games where he gets, 3 or 4 catches for 20, 30 yards and doesn't do a whole lot with. And those are not the type of players that I usually like to invest in. So that's why I'm down on Lockett more than general consensus, although I do think there is a path where he could beat this ADP significantly. At 38, another rookie I have here, it is Zay Flowers. He is my pick to emerge as the wide receiver 1 in Baltimore by the end of the year. They brought in Odell Beckham Jr., Rashod Bateman is still there, 3rd year as a former #1 pick. I'm not really a believer in Odell Beckham having a big time impact, and Bateman has not been able to stay healthy yet. So Flowers, I think, is the best and probably the cheapest option to get usage in this Baltimore offense. I think Flowers has wide receiver 2 upside as an underneath option for Jackson that could vacuum up targets. Into my 11th tier, and kicking it off is Jahan Dotson, who put up some sparkling metrics over the last couple weeks of the season last year. And from weeks 13 to 18, he was top 20 in target share at 24%. He was 3rd in end zone target share at 50%, and he was 13th in yards per route run as well. Now, there is a possibility he unseats Terry McLaurin for the #1 role in this offense, although I do think that that is unlikely. Dotson probably will suffer from volume this year, and that is why I have him outside of wide receiver 3 range. My next man up at number 40 is George Pickens, who had some big highs and some massive lows in 2022. Pickens was the wide receiver 40 last year, so we're basically buying him at his floor with this price tag. He also had 6 finishes as a top 24 wideout last year, so he showed us a bit of that upside. I think he can crush this ADP if Kenny Pickett takes a step forward and continues that great rapport that he built with Pickens, but I think more likely than not, the Steelers remain a run-first team. Pickens is a decent option, wide receiver 4 or a flex for us, but I do not expect him to really break out in 2023. Brandin Cooks is my next man. He's at 41. He walks right into that #2 wide receiving role in Dallas, which should provide plenty of value because Dalton Schultz no longer resides there, and Michael Gallup has pretty much proven at this point that he is just a guy and will not challenge Cooks for touches this year. Cooks did prove that he still has something left in the tank last year because he was a top 25 performer and route win rate in 2022. I'm going to fly through my final couple tiers. In tier 12 to start it off is Quentin Johnston. Love his upside if anything were to happen to Mike Williams or Keenan Allen, and we've seen plenty of that in the past. He could easily take over the #2 role in that offense. At 43, it is Rashod Bateman. He could be the #1 if he can overtake Zay Flowers and stay healthy. I just have question marks about his ability to do so. At 44, it is Courtland Sutton. Many people picked him as the breakout wide receiver last year when we thought Denver was going to explode, but he couldn't really stay healthy or perform consistently enough to do that. And I think he's really relegated to that #2 role in Denver, picking up the scraps from Jerry Jeudy. JuJu Smith-Schuster is after him. He's going to be New England's wide receiver 1, whatever that means. I'm not sure there's a ton of value catching balls from Mac Jones, and I'm not going to be too invested in him because of that. After JuJu at 46 and 47, I have a couple guys that I did shorts on, so check those out first and foremost if you haven't done it yet. But I think that there is good upside for both Allen Lazard in New York if he can carry on that success from last year that he had with Aaron Rodgers. And then at 47 is Skyy Moore, who has a legit path to the wide receiver 1 role for Kansas City. Now, we know Patrick Mahomes loves Travis Kelce more than anything, and he's going to continue to feed him, but there is room for opportunity for someone to slip in as that next option in this offense. Kadarius Toney can't stay healthy, and if Moore can step it up just a little bit, he has an easy path to a top 20 wide receiver finish this year. My 13th and final tier is next. These are guys that I think could hit if everything breaks their way, but they need a lot to go right for that to happen. At 48, it's Michael Thomas. If his toe ever gets better, he might be able to produce in fantasy land once again. 49 is Jameson Williams. I absolutely love him as a prospect, and I think after that 6-game suspension, he is someone we want on our rosters. It's just drafting him and waiting him out is probably not the best use of our resources. At 50, it is Treylon Burks. He got bumped down because of the addition of Nuke Hopkins in Tennessee, but he flashed last year in limited opportunities. I don't think he's going to overtake Nuke outside of an injury, but he still has some decent upside in that Tennessee offense. At 51, it is Kadarius Toney. This guy has everything in front of him. If he can play 15, 16, 17 games, he could be a top 20 receiver without a doubt, just like Skyy Moore. But the guy can't seem to stay healthy, and he doesn't seem to have a very good head on his shoulders, so I have my doubts. Couple more bonuses for you. At 52, I have Darnell Mooney. I love him in Chicago as the number 2. I just don't know what the volume is going to look like there. But if Justin Fields makes a Jalen Hurts type of leap in 1 year, then we could see massive things from Mooney this season. And then finally, Nico Collins from Houston is the last player I'm going to go over. Flashed big time towards the end of last year with CJ Stroud there. There's potentially takes that number 1 role and runs with it. I just don't have a lot of hope in that Houston offense in general, so I probably will not be investing much in it this season. And with that, I will wrap up this video. I really appreciate you guys joining me for it. Make sure you check out my shorts. Make sure you like this video as well. Subscribe to the channel to keep Relentless Press moving forward. I would love to hear about your guys' top picks at ADP. Who are players that you find yourself smashing that draft button when they are available to you? Drop a comment down below and let me know. This is Relentless Press. I am your host, Abrium Opath. Have an absolutely awesome draft season, and I will see you next time.